world, what is up? I'm your host, Brittany Jones Cooper, and welcome to Build. For the last month, we've been taking a minute to help you get ready for the upcoming school year with a special back-to-school focus series. We've looked at how to adjust to your new surroundings, how to make your dorm room feel like home, and how to make sure you stay mentally and physically fit. But today, I'm joined by my friends from Yahoo Finance to talk about how to make sure you don't go completely broke while doing it. Please help me welcome Kristin Myers and Dan Roberts. How you guys doing today?
Good. How are
Outstanding.
you?
Good, because this is honestly one of my favorite things to talk about is personal finance and empowering people around that topic. So I'm really happy to be chatting with both of you. First, I want to ask though, if you had to look back at your college experience, how would you rate yourself based on your financing, how you got through it financially?
Ooh.
That's the facial expression like no.
Yeah, I know.
Really?
In the negatives, yeah. My mom actually took all the money out of my bank account my freshman year because I blew through around $3,000 in like the first 2 months I was at college.
What were you spending it on?
Everything. any and everything. I was going shopping like all the time. It was just the first time that I had so much cash and I was alone and no one to watch over me. And yeah, going out, going to eat a lot. There's a lot of, I went to school in Philadelphia and there's like a lot of Steven Star restaurants, really great places to eat. And yeah,
I think it's useful to have us both then because I went to college somewhere totally remote in Middlebury, Vermont. So there weren't hot restaurants to go eat out at. So that was not the issue, but I definitely could have done better. I think almost everyone could spend better. Most of the things that you would spend your money on in college, you do not need to buy, or certainly don't need to buy right now while you're in college. So if I could go back, I think I would just spend less money. There's no reason to be spending money for the most part other than on food.
And not even that. Not even that.
I mean, like a meal plan.
You have a meal plan. You have a dining
Yeah.
plan.
Right.
And you get to go and eat as much as you want. So I don't know what I was thinking by going out to restaurants.
You were having a hot girl summer. It's all right.
Yeah,
you were just
really
like living
was,
your best life.
until my mom went right into my bank account and took all the rest of my money. And she said, "You're obviously not responsible enough, so I'm going to have to give you an allowance of your own money."
Grounded.
Yeah.
I did have one friend who for a long time we thought she was constantly just going to her dad for money, but it was a similar scenario. He had her money under lock and key and she had to basically ask for access to it. So that's actually really smart of your parents to get involved. I went to the University of Nebraska. I had no money going in, but I didn't need to spend any money. I had that meal plan. I was like stealing food from the cafeteria all day. And then I was a girl, so we drank for free.
Well, there
Cake
you go.
parties.
Yeah.
Parties. Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned parties. Are we supposed to pretend there isn't partying? That's okay? Because I think another thing that college kids spend money on is just buying beer.
Yeah.
Whether you are legally allowed to or not, buying beer because you want to impress people like, look, I'm the one who brought the beer. But for the most part, just never be the person who buys the beer. Just go to a party, someone else will provide. And I agree with you, eat every meal in the dining hall if you can.
Yeah.
So your advice is be that guy who doesn't pay for anything.
But that's not even that guy. Like, that's most kids in college, I think. There's a party somewhere where someone actually organized the party and there's already alcohol. Just go to that.
That's smart.
Yeah, it's like the only time in your life where it's acceptable to be like, I'm just really broke.
Yeah.
And just
Embrace
own
it.
that. It's not as cute when you're 35 and you're like, oh, I'm really broke. Like no one, you don't want to be that person. So you can be that at 20 years old or 19 years old. You can be broke and be honest about how broke you are and do things to save your money. And if you develop those really great habits while you're in college, then you don't have to be that 35-year-old guy or girl trying to like scam drinks from someone else at the bar.
So let's talk about making some money. Do you guys think it's smart for college students to find a job right away? Or should they move into campus and sort of adjust to their surroundings first and then find a job?
I think it depends on like your situation going in. Some people are privileged enough to never need a job and their parents are able to pay for their money or pay for their stuff. And some people unfortunately have to make the decision that going in they have to have a job. For me, I saved the summer before I went into college and had cash. And then when I was on campus, I also had a job. Now, there's two different ways that you can really do this. You could do work study, which is actually a part of like your student loan package, your financial aid. And that's great because you can only work like 20 hours a week, like tops. So it's very, the responsibility isn't very high. And it just gives you money to like use for when you do want to go out or when you do want to buy something. So I think that's really great. And then there's also people that have to have like full-time jobs. And if you can avoid that, because being a student is your ultimate job, if you can avoid doing anything that's going to take away from work, that's always, I think, preferable.
I mean, I did find, and this sounds like kind of an old person thing, but it's just the truth. I found that people who were working in some capacity were usually better people because of it. I mean, I don't want this to necessarily become a discussion about privilege, and if you don't have to have a full-time job, that's great for you. But the people I knew who either they worked in the dining hall or they were working at the library checking in books. Now, I don't know with each person whether they had to do that to supplement their income, or in some cases it's just good practice. But for the most part, the people who you meet who had to work starting at a younger age are just the better people for it. They're more mature, they've learned more about themselves, they've learned how to function as an adult.
Right.
So
you gain a lot of tools when you work. Yeah. I mean, you learn how to budget a lot better because you have a certain amount of money coming in every month. You're hyper efficient because you know you have to go to work between certain hours in addition to doing your schoolwork and going to class. So I think I personally would advocate everyone get a job, whether you need it or not, but it just needs to be something that's not, the load, the burden cannot be too high that all of a sudden you're failing school. If you're not going to class because you're working, well then something's wrong.
Yeah, the priority should be
the priority is always school first, going to class first, doing well first, and then anything else.
Well, and then to complicate it even further, there's volunteer work, which I think can be really wonderful. I remember I was a peer tutor in the writing center. Sounds very dorky, but I mean, I loved doing that. I found it really rewarding. I met a lot of people that way, both fellow college students and then people from town. And I just think it's good to put work in.
Fun fact, tutoring, at least at the University of Pennsylvania, is like the top paying job that you can have. Oh yeah, it pays like, well, it paid $10 an hour back when I went.
But you own, like you said,
who
you
knows
don't
how
need
much
that
it makes.
much money, and
No.
you just need a schedule. I worked in the office of admissions, so I would call prospective students, and then I would also give campus tours. Like you said, I was working maybe 20 hours a week. I had a little money in my pocket,
Right.
And it also just made me more aware of my spending, and I was then least likely to get a credit card, which I saw a lot of people fall into that trap. So. You know, it's hard for students to avoid credit cards, especially freshman, sophomore year when they're getting into campus. Do you guys have any tips for being
avoid
smart
it
about
in
that?
what way? You can't avoid the people, like the vultures, hanging out around campus, off, but you absolutely can avoid it not getting one. It's easy. Say no. Do not get a credit card. I mean, like,
Or
literally,
that's in addition to whatever
the
card you have, because I think it can be good to build up credit on one card. What I think is dangerous is when you get these rewards things, like you're shopping at J. Crew. Say, oh, you're about to spend $600. If you just buy the J. Crew card now,
yeah, that's a
you'll
terrible,
get 20% off.
That's
But
a terrible
no,
idea, period.
Yeah.
Right. Anytime you're at a store and they're like, oh, do you want to open like the Macy's card? No, you don't.
Well, it's very understandable why people fall for that, because especially if you're making like a big purchase, maybe it's the back to school shopping. I remember I used to just go to like J. Crew and buy everything there. Times have changed because J. Crew is still around, but people are not going to J. Crew. Sorry, but you would go to one store and kind of buy a ton of stuff because you're saying this is stuff I need for school, and then they say, oh, since you're spending a lot of money, get this credit card. It's very tempting.
No, because you can't use it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
A store credit card can only be used in the store. It's a terrible idea. But in terms of credit cards in general, to Dan's point about building credit, I actually somewhat disagree. You're already building credit by fact of you having a student loan. Just going to college and having a student loan. If you have a loan, but most kids when they go to college, a lot of them do have a student loan. Or they're on a loan that their parents have taken out. I mean, that already is building credit. And it's much better credit to accrue, like a mortgage, for example. Like, not all debt is bad debt, so to speak. And so a student loan is not necessarily bad debt. A mortgage, for example, is not bad debt. Credit card, however, bad debt, bad debt, bad debt. And right now, credit card interest rates are the highest. Yeah.
That's why I have a slightly different point of view where I think getting a credit card can be really great, but I would only put on your phone bill every month and just pay that down. If you're really somebody whose intention is to build credit, then I think you put on one small charge every month and pay that down. I don't think you go to the student union and buy a whole bunch of stuff and put your books on it and do all that. Like, that's crazy. But I do understand. That's what I did personally, and I have had that line of credit open since I was a freshman, and it's my oldest line of credit.
Yeah, and I would just argue having a card, or whenever it is you get your first card, it's kind of a good being thrown in the deep end of the pool learning experience, because just doing your homework, learning to pay that payment, make sure you pay it. I mean, anything that we're going to talk about today, the same kind of lesson applies, which is just do your homework, pay things on time, know when payments are due, know exactly how much is owed, see how much you can budget out, etc.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't even get a credit card in college. So there's a secured credit card where you actually have to put the balance on it. Let's say it's $500. And then after I think like a year and a half, then they'll let you open up a line of credit. But I think it's a good time to start like being more disciplined if you can.
Right. I mean, there's nothing wrong if I know some people have credit cards, like an emergencies only card. It has a very low credit limit. For when I was in, I think I was 18 or 19. I went to college when I was 17 because I'm a late. My birthday is late. I got a credit card, or rather, my mom got a credit card for me. I didn't want one. She insisted I get one. But we actually slashed the credit limit, which I hate now. I have like the credit limit of like a 12-year-old on this one card, but we slashed it, and that can actually be really helpful. If you want to get a credit card for emergencies only, and they say, "Oh, guess what? You have $20,000." You can actually call them up and say, "Hey, I actually don't need a credit limit of 20 grand. Can you actually make it 2 grand?" They will do that for you, and if it's something for emergencies only, then go ahead and do that, and that way you know that you'll max out at 2,000. That could be a more manageable number, even if you go into debt. 2,000, far better you pay down $2,000 than 20, 15, something really exorbitant.
Did you ever get an overdraft fee on a debit card? Did we all go through that formative experience?
So many.
Oh yeah.
And when your overdraft is more than you have in the actual account, that's even better.
Right.
Like
That sounds.
As soon as you get the first overdraft, you're done. You got to stop there. Something is wrong.
But
I
they
don't need that
overdraft
kind-
you,
I don't need
and
that
then they
kind of
take the
negativity
fee,
in
but
my
then
life.
it's like they'll keep doing it.
Right, like them taking the overdraft fee is actually what's killing you and making you into the overdraft.
Yeah.
Like $90 in overdraft, you're like -90. That happened to me.
You can get overdraft protection though.
Yeah.
Good tip
Do that. Listen to her.
for everyone.
This all takes us to the natural point of budgeting. That can be hard, especially if you didn't grow up in a household where your parents taught you how to do that. Are there any platforms or apps or any services that people can go to kind of help them get better control of their money and their budget?
So there's Mint, and I think that's a pretty popular one that everyone knows about. You can put all of your accounts and link your credit card to it, and it'll actually do the work for you.
LearnVest, another.
Yeah, but
we had her on the show.
oh right, yeah. So I mean, there are applications for it. Personally, I actually like pen and paper, which is weird. I do everything on my phone.
Google Doc nowadays.
So wait, what's a good starting point for that? Pen and paper, like what are we writing down exactly?
Okay, so it depends if, of course, you have a job, but on the one side, you have to put down your expenses, right? All of your bills, the things that you know you are absolutely going to have to pay. And then on the other side, you put your income that's coming in, and that's where you find that delta, the difference between how much you're earning as opposed to the amount of money that you have to come out. You can find out where your discretionary funds come in. So if every month after you pay all of those bills, you find you have, oh, look, I have $500 left over, then you start saying to yourself, okay, well, I know I'm going to go out. And no one says that you shouldn't have fun or that you really should just sit in your room and save every single penny, because frankly, that's not feasible. It's just not realistic. And to tell someone to do that is going to set them up in the long run, essentially to go into debt. So you might say, okay, I'm in college. I really only need maybe $100 a month out of that 500. The 400 I'm going to go and put in savings. Or if you want to start investing, then you start investing with that money. The problem is when the money coming in is less than the money going out, and that's when you start to have to make really crucial decisions.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, I know, right? Shut up. That's when you have to make crucial decisions about what you need to cut. I mean, does your cable bill really need to? Do you need cable?
Do you need Netflix
Do you
and
need
Hulu?
Right. No, then you got to start cutting
Disney
stuff.
Plus
Yes.
and HBO Go.
Yes.
Cut it. I would say too that most of these apps and services, whether it's a website, whether it's Mint, whatever it is, they're doing something for you, and in some cases, eventually they're going to charge you a fee for the service that really is something you could do yourself. If you are willing to put in the time and the homework, and maybe at the beginning you should at least do this, and that is log on to your bank. We all have online banking. Look at what you charged in a given month and put those in the segments. And you're going to realize something, I hope something not too disturbing, but you're going to see, oh my goodness, I'm spending X amount on that. And maybe it's food outside the dining hall, outside your meal plan. Maybe it's beer. Maybe it's drinking out rather than going to the dorm room party where someone else bought the beer, like I was saying. But whatever it is, stop doing it and spend less.
Yeah.
I mean, just don't be stupid. Again, I think in college now, I know what you're saying about, it's foolish to think that you can get away with spending no money on social activities, but college is kind of the one classic example of a time when, for the most part, you should be able to have fun with friends
You're
without
right.
spending a lot of money.
This is the only time in your life where going out will be as close to free
Right.
as you can
Exactly
possibly
right.
get.
If you're spending
So
money
really
every
take it-
time, like
really
you're doing
take
something wrong.
advantage.
Yeah.
But his tip actually is a really good financial tip and tool, honestly, even outside of college. I mean, every year I give up something, for example, for Lent. And this year I decided to give up 1 alcohol and 2 eating out and also ordering food. I saved like $700 in 40 days. I was like, I can't believe I spent this much money to go out in New York City. That's insane. And then I made it a personal habit of mine just not to do that as much. I mean, it's something good for you to check in routinely to see where you are spending your money and all the frivolous things that you are spending your money on. It's great to start in college because these are good habits to build and to form throughout your lifetime, honestly.
It's also interesting because, especially in 2019, it's all about access to things, digital things, rather than ownership. And when I look back and think what I spend money on, most of it are things that, some form of technology that you no longer need. I mean, I was buying a lot of books. Well, you don't usually need to do that. Use the library or...
Oh, do not buy textbooks.
Right.
Oh, that's a huge hack. I mean, I can't
Bought
believe-
DVDs. We're talking about 2008,
Yeah, that was stupid.
2009. Why? I'll never want those again. Why did I buy DVDs? So just, I keep thinking of the gift from Coming to America. Just like...
So I think it's important to balance out that, your accounts. But you mentioned maybe you have a little money extra for a rainy day fund. And I cannot say this enough. It is so important to have some sort of emergency fund. And most Americans don't, especially people in college. So is there any way to sort of help create a rainy day fund that's not going to take too much away from your expenses?
So, I mean, there's a lot of easy ways that you can do it. Your bank, for example, you can have more than one account with your bank. You can have your checking account, you can have your savings account, you can have more than one savings account. And you can actually make rules in your account where anytime you get a paycheck, for example, above a certain amount, it'll actually funnel money automatically away into a completely separate account. That way it's like out of sight, out of mind. You're like, oh, I didn't even notice $200 just kind of disappeared from my paycheck. I mean, you're because it's happening every single month. And then you go and look at your other account and bam, you've saved a couple thousand. But I know there's also some apps that will do that for you.
Yeah, I've written about a number of these apps. One good one is Digit, and it basically does that. It's squirreling away money from your own linked bank account, money that an algorithm determines you can afford to sort of not notice is being taken. And of course, at any time, if you think too much is being taken, you can adjust it. But basically, it should be painless if it's working. And I have found that it works pretty well. So without you knowing, say every few days it's taking $2 out, whatever it is, and it's putting it away somewhere else. It's not even accruing interest, but it's just basically a slush fund. And then every so often you check in and you're like, what's my Digit balance? And you'll realize very quietly, gradually, I have like $3,000 in this other account. And now I need it, and I take it back. So you're just taking back your own money, but kind of a clever savings tool. And then in the same vein, we've seen the rise of like roundup apps, where basically you link a card, and every time that you make a purchase, whatever the runoff changes. So let's say you go to Whole Foods and it was $5.92. 8 cents is automatically invested into something. So that's what Acorns does. That's why it's called Acorns, kind of a clever name, grows into a tree. So they're investing that spare change into funds for you. Yeah. Now, of course, we should be so lucky to be able to spare some money to invest, but eventually if you get to that point, something very smart to do.
Right.
And I would say back to your method, that's how I started saving money. And I always say, don't be intimidated like you have to put away $200 a month. I started putting away $10 a month when I couldn't really spare much more than that. And then you kind of get competitive with yourself. And you look at that account, and you're like, wow, I have $100. Maybe I should save $25 a month. You know what I mean? And then you kind of build up naturally and gradually. That's the advice I gave my younger sister, because it's like, it can feel overwhelming, but it's a necessary thing.
Right. I mean, you don't have to worry about percentages for savings as much when you are in college. I think that is when you graduate college and now you actually have to worry about paying your rent and, other things like that. But yeah, sometimes setting goals is really great. You tell yourself, okay, this summer I want to do something and I need X amount of dollars, or I want to go somewhere and I need X amount, or this is my savings goal. Break it out, because when you start saving, and you have like a really big number in mind, let's say you want to save $10,000, that sounds like a lot of money. But if you say, okay, I want to save $10,000 over the course of 2 years, and you break out actually how much that is going to cost you per month, and then how much that's going to cost you per week, it's actually not a lot. I mean, they always say if you mind the pennies, the dollars will mind themselves. And so that's really important. Start really thinking about the little things you make purchases on. It's very easy for everyone to say, okay, I'm not going to go buy that new laptop or that new cell phone that's several $1,000s, right? But people will then go and spend that same amount of money on things that cost a lot less that they actually don't really need. So you really need to ask those critical questions about, do I actually need this? Or is this just something that I want when you're in a store or you want to purchase something? I'm the fan, like, I love buying stuff and returning it. I'm like a huge returner. It's like a secret high for me. So I just like buy something, then I return it. I'm like, yes, I got money back. Or I'll like walk out of the store and I'm like, okay, if I'm still thinking about this in a week, then I'll go back and I'll get it.
That's the old mom wisdom, totally.
Yeah.
That's why
But
a
it works,
sale is so
though.
dangerous.
Yeah.
The whole psychological lure of the sale is buy something that you wouldn't otherwise buy. And if, the lesson should be, if you wouldn't otherwise need it or want it or buy it, when it's not on sale, you should not be buying it on sale either.
Right.
Because then they get you.
And if after a couple days you're like, I didn't even think about that dress or those shoes, either return it, like I do, or just don't go back and buy it.
Restraint.
Before we get out of here, we have to talk about loans, just briefly. What are your tips for how people should approach loans? Should they be really cautious in the beginning and be very aware? Or is it something that after the fact you should be more worried about? What is sort of the best strategy for how to approach loans and interest?
I think college loans is something that is pretty unavoidable in this country. College is incredibly expensive if you're not going to community college, and even that can sometimes be cost prohibitive. Right. So it's not something that you can avoid. I think first and foremost, you need to start off with what the government is going to give you. Fill out your FAFSA. How much money can you get in the form of a scholarship or in a financial aid package? That's the first place that you need to start. It's incredible how many people I have met that I went to school with that talked to me about how high their student debt is, like 200 grand. I'm like, you didn't get any money? And they're like, oh, I just like never filled out the scholarship form. And you're like, this is free money.
To private loan,
it's literally free money that is being given to you by the United States federal government or even sometimes your state government, depending on where you're going to school. So first, absolutely fill those forms out. Two, then apply for scholarships. Any and every scholarship that you can possibly apply for, you should apply for it. And then three, when it comes to the student loans, the first place you want to go is right back to the federal government. Because you can get Stafford loans that are subsidized or even unsubsidized. They will defer payments for you. You will not get the same kind of rates and deals from a private bank as you will from the federal government. I mean, the interest rates on private loans is incredibly high, whereas with the federal government, they are much lower. So always see what you can get in terms of Stafford loans or loans from the government first, and then if you have to supplement, then go to a private loan.
In addition to being so cost prohibitive, it's also very confusing, and I think that's part of what makes the loan system so exploitative. I mean, the amount of which your loans can suddenly be owned by someone else. Companies are buying up the rights to your loans from another company, and then you're notified and you get a snail mail, and you say, oh, I don't even know anymore which company my check is going to. I remember when I had loans in grad school, my head was spinning with Stafford subsidized versus unsubsidized, and federal and non-federal. And so I would just say you need to try your best to sift through it and do your homework and keep files and have sort of a master document that has exactly who is the current steward of my loan, where do I need to send my payments to, how much every month, and make the payments. Because as soon as you kind of fall behind is then when you're in big trouble.
And subsidized, of course, better than unsubsidized. So even among the federal loans, right, you're going to go for that subsidized loan first, and then unsubsidized, and then you're going to want to go to, if you have to, getting a private loan. But that, honestly, try to make that your last resort.
And it can be confusing, like you guys mentioned. It's sort of set up against us in a lot of ways. So I always remind people the bursar's office is there. Your university has a financial aid office there. Go in, ask questions, let them help you, navigate the atmosphere. You don't have to do it by yourself.
Oh, they knew my name by the time I graduated. I would go in there all the time. Also, fun fact, you can, we used to call it bursar cash. If you ever need an emergency like cash, you can actually bursar money and they will actually put it on your bill. But it's a interest-free short-term loan. do not, I mean, do not do what I did in college. Do not abuse it, right? It really is for emergencies. Don't use it in the way that I did. I'll just please avoid my missteps. I mean, I used it to like go to Puerto Rico, but that's neither here nor there.
The Bursar Spring Break Fund.
Right,
That's
but
right,
I will
that's right.
say, if you do ever need emergency money for some reason and you are actually thinking of going into a bank and getting a loan, it is better that you instead walk into your bursar's office and ask them for cash. And they are actually very critical. How much do you need and why do you need it? And
Not for beer and not for Puerto Rico.
right,
though.
and like why do you need it? And they'll ask you all of these questions, and they will literally give you the bare minimum that you need, and then it goes on to your tuition bill. So you have to pay it back pretty quickly. But it's far better to do that than to go to a bank that has a 15% interest rate and take out a loan for $500, because then you're going to be paying back so much more.
On that note, I'm curious, what was the biggest financial mistake you guys made in college?
Oh, besides bursar and cash?
Well, I was actually looking for more insight into that, but any other stories too?
I think for me, it was freshman year. It was honestly just blowing money on a lot of clothes that I didn't end up wearing, on drinks that I didn't really need to drink, on food that I didn't need to eat. But in hindsight, I'm grateful, because I really hated that my mom took my money from me. And so the next year, I worked over the summer, and I didn't need that. I became very frugal. Like, anyone who knows me now knows I penny pinch everything, even things that I need. I'm like, I don't need it that badly.
Yeah, clothing, man. No one cares what you're wearing in college. No one cares.
Except
like,
for everybody cares.
Except for,
what
I
you're
was like,
wearing.
that's
No,
not
but
true.
I mean, soon enough, you look back and I couldn't tell you who
That's true. You're going to make
was
a lot
who
of
dressed
fashion.
well. It's so
Yeah.
unimportant.
There's a lot of fashion mistakes you make in college, so don't spend a whole ton of money on that.
Yeah, clothes. And then for me, a little bit more serious and unfortunate, but when I look back at grad school, which is when I had loans, I took out in loans more than I needed, because you're trying to also estimate. I was talking about the confusion, and they're banking on you getting confused and missing payments, and at least the private loans. But I also was taking loans both for tuition plus housing. This is at Columbia. And I took more in loans than I really actually ended up needing. So then you're trying to pay it back, and in the end, I'm sure I ended up paying out much more than I ever really needed to take out,
Your student loans.
You don't have anyone helping you with that.
Your student loans will actually pay for you to live off campus. I did that my senior year, because I know a lot of people live off campus. No, but I mean, like, you can actually have your student loan pay you out, and you can use that to pay your rent off campus. Whereas it normally would go directly to the school to pay your dorm fee, you can actually use it to pay for off-campus housing. So never a reason for you to go take on additional debt and additional loans. Yeah.
So the moral of the story is, we all have options, but people need to do some research, ask a lot of questions, be prepared. Don't act too quickly.
Don't be stupid is my message.
Don't be stupid, and that's how to not go broke in college.
Yeah.
Basically.
The Dwight Schrute.
Well, this is really helpful. I mean, both of
advice.
you guys offered some really good insights here, and I know there's a ton of resources on Yahoo Finance if people have more questions, so make sure you guys check that out. And please put your hands together for Kristin Myers and Dan Roberts.